How's it going, everyone? Data here. It is that time of year again. Welcome to my ultimate wish list for franchise mode headed into NHL 24 and beyond. NHL 24 will be released in about 7 weeks from the date of upload on October 6th, 2023, and moving into this game, we are doing so with a bit of a different understanding surrounding franchise mode. In my NHL 23 franchise mode wish list video last year, a lot of my suggestions were made in a way that had me pointing out the flaws in franchise and honestly deep down thinking that none of it would ever change. And although those feelings of frustration with EA over the last few years have not quite disappeared, and most of what I'm saying in this year's wish list is literally a copy and paste of what I said last year, I'm making this year's wish list with much more optimism. With the new direction and, quote, 3-year plan that the NHL series now has with its new development team, and even with GM Connected or Connected Franchise being something that EA is actively moving towards, I am completely willing to give them the benefit of the doubt and see what's in store. Have there been broken promises from EA in the past? Absolutely. But I don't want to assign my previous frustration to this new development team, and I will judge them according to these next few games. With that being said, we already know that nothing really new is happening in NHL 24 in regard to the offline modes. But I hope that this video will serve as a guide for future years as the development team searches for suggestions from the community. That's why I put a lot of work into this video, and I hope that the right person or people will eventually see it. So sit back and relax, go ahead and use the timestamps down below. I'll be talking about a few different things. First off, some new changes, which would be great in a fun, perfect world to see. But we're also going to be talking about how could some things that are already in the game be fixed or be better, line chemistry, coaches, editing players, the players themselves, injuries, transactions. We're going to be talking about all of that. So maybe a lengthy video, longer than just, hey, here's what I want, bang, here you go. But I'll be talking through all of my suggestions, and I think they're very fair suggestions. I know a lot of them sometimes are unfair. Oh, I hate EA. The American prospects can't play at the University of Michigan. Well, they don't have the rights to the University of Michigan, so I don't blame them for not having certain things in the game if they don't have the rights to the KHL or whatever else. But there are some things, especially that have been in MLB The Show, in FIFA, in Madden, in NBA 2K, that have been in the game for a very long time. So to still not see them headed into NHL 24, there is some frustration for sure. So some of these suggestions are for fun, others are for quality of life. Regardless, as a lover of franchise mode, I just want to see some of these things happen. Glitches that have been in the mode year after year after year become more and more tiresome. So I don't mean to sound like I'm complaining. I do mean all of this with the best intentions for EA, especially with the new team behind the game, because like I said, I do indeed love franchise mode, but it's just frustrating when it could be so much better with just a few tweaks. So this is going to be a comprehensive list that goes from the it would be nice kind of things, but there's also a good number of things I'm going to say that have become imperative at this point. So first up on my wish list is a GM tracker. My all-time record as a GM for each team that I've been with, a list of the transactions that I've made, the awards that my players have won, all things that should be and have previously been tracked. I believe it was NHL 13, 14, and even maybe 15 that had awards that they would give you. They'd, you'd be a silver GM, a gold GM, the amount of games that you've been a GM for, stuff like that. So for those of us who enjoy simulating 20 plus years, we have to keep spreadsheets of all of these things. For example, look at this spreadsheet right here. This was my San Jose Sharks series on NHL 23, which we had done here on the channel. Everything had to be kept on a spreadsheet and doing averages and keeping track of totals. It's a big job, which could just be done inside the mode. They have the record book. They have things like that already. They've done it in the past as well. You know, even a sort of recap after 25 years when the franchise mode finishes would be nice, as opposed to the you have reached the end of franchise mode that they give you. Like, you do 25 years, you dedicate hundreds of hours, you have reached the end. Cool, no stats, nothing, darkness. And furthermore, why the 25-year limit? I would want to see many more years. Like, I don't have much experience with NBA or Madden, but I doubt there's a limit on those. I know there's no limit on MLB or FIFA. Why the 25-year limit in NHL? Also, when speaking of franchise tracking, we need to have a screen that shows you how each player came to your organization. Look at this on MLB The Show. They have it here by draft, by trade, through free free agency. If I acquired a 6th round pick in some random throwaway trade 8 years ago, and now that player is going to be like a star on my team, I'm not going to remember that. I want to be able to go back and read, oh man, yeah, I remember that trade. Whoa, crazy how it panned out in this way down the road. I think that would be an incredible addition. And sticking on MLB, a lot of the stuff I'm going to start off with is MLB related. Provide the ability to user any game for any team. For example, let's say that my team did not make the postseason. All I can see really is the playoff tree. I can't follow along with the postseason in any other way. But if I could just flip over in the calendar and say, oh, Detroit's in Stanley Cup final, let me just flip from Montreal to Detroit. Ah, here's their schedule. Let me slow sim their games and watch it unravel period by period. You can let me play it, you can not let me play it, you can just let me see it, but it would be nice to just be able to follow along with that a bit more. It would also be a lot better for when we're doing career simulations, but even if you want to restrict me to not playing anything, why can't I at least see, as opposed to having to live under a rock once I've been eliminated? Building off of being able to watch games, adding a game log to games that passed in calendar simulation would be huge. I don't need to constantly go back to the stats page or slow sim games that I want information on. For example, as opposed to just simulating until September 20th and then clicking on September 19th and saying, hey, what happened in that game? I need to go and click on sim game, wait for it, wait for it, wait for it. Okay, sim period, again, sim period. All right, it was 4-1 the final. Now I can go and click on Montreal stats, Detroit stats, and look at it a bit more closely. Hey, Gallagher hat trick. But I have to go into each game to be able to do that. So it takes a lot of time. If I want to see, let's say, even just the last few games, I need to exit the calendar, go to player stats. It doesn't work well for wanting just a quick answer at a glance. It's always having to go in depth. So being able to access that game log, just like, once again, MLB, would be a huge plus, especially to calendar simulation. Also, while speaking about the calendar, how about the speed of simulation? It is incredible. I know I'm on PlayStation 4. Some people have said on PlayStation 5 things go more quickly, but it's not quick enough no matter which console you're on. Watch this. Just a week and a half of simulation. Just let's get the owner stuff out. Just pure simulation. Let's see how this goes. 1 day. 1 day. Trade pop-up, 1 day. 1 day. 1 day. Wait for it. 1 day. 1 day. 1 day. In MLB The Show, when you're simulating, bang, 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 bang. You can do a whole month in like 20 seconds, and you can go back to each game and see what happened in that game. So not only is MLB simulating more quickly, but it's also giving me a lot more details. I'm doing a lot of MLB comparison right now. It's not going to be all MLB, but just to say, in their franchise mode, it's possible. With this speed being so slow and all of the pop-ups, it can be so tedious to get through a whole season. That's why when I do career simulations and I go through 20 years of someone's career, it legitimately takes about 15, 20, 25 minutes per season. And that's if I'm going as fast as I can just with all the pop-ups. Central scouting rankings. Hey, the pro scouts on the line want to change your trade block. December 1st RFA warning, contract limit warning, staff retirement screen, so on and so on and so on. It's a huge waste of time. I should be able to turn those on or off, just like I can turn on or off trade offers or waiver notifications and head coaches getting fired pop-ups. How come I can turn those off but not the other things, like my pro scout telling me every month, hey, you want to upgrade the trade block? Blah, blah. No, I don't. No, thank you. Also, again, while I'm on the trail of simulation, if you're slow simming and you jump into the game, elements of what took place in the game already shouldn't be forgotten. Let me show you an example of that. Let's say I'm going to see the Tampa Bay Lightning here in this game and I'm slow simming it. And here with about 5 minutes left in the third period, now I want to hop in. I've scored 1 goal on 38 shots, Tampa has scored 5 goals on 29 shots, and I jump into the game. Now that I'm in the game, I can go ahead and look at the game log. You'll see that it says that Jake Allen has only played for 40 minutes in this game when he has really played for 55 minutes. Now, what that does is that it changes his goals against average. As opposed to, let's say he allowed 5 goals over the course of 60 minutes, it would say a goals against average of 5, it would now say, if it ends at 40 minutes, 7.5 goals against average. So even though he played a full 60 minutes and he allowed 5 goals, his stats are saying that he allows 7.5 goals against average. So that's altering, one, just his stats in general, but two, if you do it enough and you go into your simulations enough, it could affect his overall growth or a prospect's development, because performance is closely tied to development. If you go into your simulation often and your goaltender's goals against average continues to get inflated again and again and again enough times per year, I would say that that has a direct impact on that player's growth. I wouldn't say that this glitch really has a huge impact on the majority of players, but it is an odd thing that's been in the game for at least 10 years now. Speaking of goalies in simulation, I often find that if a goaltender gets pulled, let's say Allen got pulled after 5 goals and Montembeault was the goalie, you'll come into the simulation and see Montembeault, but then after the first whistle, they'll change and Allen will come back. So that's not really something I've experimented with too much. Maybe that's been changed, but again, since at least like NHL 14, that's been happening. Next up in the new category, but not really new because this was in NHL 07, NHL 08, how about the option of receiving monthly or even quarterly updates? In NHL 07, for example, you would get mail for the weekly hot or cold streaks around the entire league. And yes, that can get a bit much, a bit annoying over time, but why not a monthly roundup type of thing in your message center? Here in the message center where you have a hockey analyst. Can you not, like, you don't gotta tell me Bob McKenzie and Darren Dreger, but you have a million generated prospect names. Can you at least name this guy like Gerald McMuffin or whatever other random name you're gonna give these prospects? Why are they always hockey analyst? And it's always the same stock photo of that one guy who's collecting royalties on a beach somewhere, who's been having this picture used for decades. Hockey analyst, hockey analyst, hockey analyst. So having that fixed, plus getting some information on your team, that would be great. Like MLB has that where it tells you, hey, this guy down in AAA, they didn't have a good month. Or hey, this guy did have a great month. It can tell you a bit about your AHL system. Even if someday ECHL were to be included, it would be an update on your ECHL team. I understand that ECHL still probably won't be in franchise mode because only 28 out of the 32 teams in the NHL have an ECHL affiliation. But I would like to see that to be something that gets added to the game someday if all 32 teams were to have ECHL affiliations. Now, as we're still talking about simulation and all that stuff and goalies, here's another big one that would be helpful in simulation, a goalie split slider. When you have two goalies of different overalls, the higher goalie is your starter automatically. And if you turn on auto goalie rotate down here in your settings right here, and it's turned on, your backup goalie will play in back-to-back, so they'll get 10, whatever, 15 starts a season. Some sort of 60-20 split for the games. But if you were to have two goalies that are the same overall, let's say I have a veteran who's an 84, 83, and then a rookie who's also an 83, the game will automatically split them about 40 games each. And that may not be what I prefer. Maybe I want that rookie to still be the backup, and my goalie, although he's an 83 as a starter, maybe he performs better than an 83, and I love how he simulates. I don't want to have to pause simulation 82 times a season to go back, exit, go to my edit lines, manage rosters, edit lines. Wait. Okay, even strength, goalies, change, exit, and then I'll keep simulating. Do that 82 times, you're going to pull your hair out. And again, just talking about goalies. Goalies have to be better. Essentially, in franchise mode, you need to decide if you want accurate-ish goalie performances and no one in the league scores over 100 points, or you get accurate-ish player performances and the best goalie in the league has like a 9-10 save percentage. Because now the game has added the sim engine scoring, low, medium, high, you can change that how you like, and sim engine shot frequency, low, medium, high, you can change that how you like. You can kind of play with goalie performance. If I put shot frequency to low and sim engine scoring to low, more often than not, I will see those high 80s and 90 overall goalies having great performances. But Connor McDavid is scoring like 85 points. If I put scoring on high and shooting on high, so that Ovechkin is taking over 300 shots, and McDavid is scoring over 120 points. Really, he should be even higher. Well, then you have, as I just mentioned, the Vezina Trophy winning goaltender is going to have like a 907 or 910 save percentage. There has to be some sort of middle ground. Last season in the NHL, there were 11 100-plus point scorers, 28 point-per-game players, but still 15 goalies with a 915 save percentage or better. Again, there just has to be some sort of middle ground for goalie performance to make overalls mean more, and you don't have some random 78 overall sealing the crease. We've seen this all before. It's been in my franchise mode series. I'll have an 85 plus overall goalie who has a sub 900 save percentage. I'll call up my goalie from the AHL who's a 78 overall, like the Philip Lindbergh story back in the Sharks series, and he'll win over 30 games and just win the Vezina and carry us to a Stanley Cup, no problem. Crazy fun storylines, and yes, there's some realism that players will have their on years and their off years, but NHL franchise mode has become notorious now for years and years and years that goalie overall doesn't really matter that much. A lot of my soapbox statement right there may not quite fit into this new change kind of category, but that's how much goalies getting better would feel like a new change. Finally, here are my last thoughts for the new change editions. And this one might be a bit of a long shot, but this would be a lot of fun. What about being able to start your franchise mode in different eras, a la NBA 2K? In 2K, you can start your mode in a different era, which may begin in 1983, 1991, 2002, or the present day. If you start in one of those eras, the Jordan era, the Kobe era, those rule changes, expansion teams, rebranding, and relocation is all historically accurate. So if you start in 1991, for example, the Raptors and the Grizzlies join the league in 1995, and then the Grizzlies move from Vancouver to Memphis 6 years later, unless you decide otherwise. That would be incredible for the NHL series. If you could just join in the original 6 era, the Gretzky era, or whatever else with those same parameters in place. That would be a huge blast. So that just about wraps up my, the brand new screens, the menu, stuff like that I like to see. My next category is kind of like a subsection of this, as it would be new, but it goes more into gameplay than management. And that category would be events and tournaments. There are 3 that I want to highlight here. Number 1, the World Juniors. Now that the IIHF game modes exist, why not include them during the season? It's not even that we have to play them and it's too hard to make happen while the NHL and AHL games are also simulating during December, blah, blah, blah. But just to say that they happen, and you can get stats on how your prospects did. Again, back to that news information. You had a little roundup. Hey, this prospect you have, they were on Team Canada. They won gold. They got this many points. Especially that IIHF is already in NHL, the NHL series, I wouldn't see it as the craziest stretch to get into franchise mode. Next would be the Winter Classic. Winter Classic has been there in previous games and now it's gone. It doesn't have to be like, oh, it's at this stadium and these sponsorships and, oh, we can't get the rights. Why not just make it a generic outdoor arena, whatever you want to call it, EA Arena, and you get 2 random teams to play each January 1st. If you can randomize the draft lottery every year, why can't you randomize that 2 or 4 or 6 teams get to play a Winter Classic or a Heritage Classic or whatever else every January? I think that would be a very fun touch of added realism, and a lot of people have been asking for that. But what people have been asking for even more, the third event that I want to highlight, is the All-Star Game. There is absolutely no excuse for this to have been removed since it was in so many NHL games prior to, I want to say the PS4 era. I'm thinking NHL 16, 17 onward. I remember all those games before having the All-Star Game. And at this point, we should be asking for a skills competition as well, which would be great. But unfortunately, here we are just begging to have an All-Star Game itself. Top players in the league get to play East versus West. There's no change that the winners get to have home ice advantage. It's just a pure top players in the league come together. You already have the All-Star break in the calendar. Why can't the All-Star game be added? This one I really don't understand why, because it's been in previous games. It wouldn't be a brand new thing that we're asking for. Here it is, the first week of February. Here's this break from the 1st to the 10th. There's the All-Star break. I don't know. It should be there. And then, of course, we already have, you can play drills, you can do shooting, you can do target drills, you can do skating drills. There's no reason why you couldn't have a skills competition on top of all of that. But there are the 3 events that we'd like to see added. Moving on from there, I now want to go through some of what we already have in franchise mode and comment on how it may be tweaked due to glitches, oversight, or just downright confusion. So first up, we have line chemistry. I would say that line chemistry in general has gotten better since it was first introduced, but players should be able to adjust to coaches and or teammates over time. It's a small request in my opinion. This should be a small request, small fix. Slavkovsky, Suzuki, Caulfield, they have never played together, let's say, but they get a +5 solely because of their X factors. Meanwhile, if I put Gallagher on that top line, oh, now it's a +2, even though they've played together for years. What if I bring Paul Byron in here to play with Gallagher and Suzuki? Well, now it's a 0, but these guys have been together for a long time. Shouldn't they have a little chemistry? That's where the line fit comes in. Oh, okay, I understand. The line fit doesn't work, so there's no chemistry. Fair enough. But then why can't it evolve over time? It shouldn't be that this line has a 0 or a -1 or whatever else for players who have been together for years. But then if I were to acquire some player who's never played once with these guys, I slap him on that line and boom, +5. They've never been together ever, boom, +5. While the other guys who've been together for a decade, still at a 0. So again, my request is, why can we not have evolving chemistry? If a great two-way player with like 5-star defense, for example, has been on my first pound and kill unit with the same coach for like a decade, could he maybe get some positive chemistry? Or like, let's see Sean Monahan, line fit, penalty kill strategy X. He's a two-way forward with, he doesn't have crazy defensive attributes, but he's a good defensive player on my top unit, but he has an X. Why does he keep that X forever? Why can it not become a dash or a check mark after years and years and years? What if his defensive attributes were to grow to 5 stars and he's still getting an X? I find that extremely odd. So explaining how the system works in general would definitely be a plus. Being able to edit some of the strategies would be nice, as like you can see pound and kill formation, it's blanked out. 1-1-2, you can't change it. You can change the face-off format, which is nice, but you can't do anything else. If I go to my even strength lines, I see the same things again. You can press edit strategies, but really it just means edit starting line. Which line do you want starting the game? You can't touch anything else. Carry, dump, cycle, shoot, efficiency, energy, don't block, block. All this stuff, it says you click the button to edit, but you're not allowed to edit, so I don't get it. So that would be great. And maybe just like some sort of handbook to explain how chemistry works. MLB has a crazy handbook that explains everything about the franchise mode and the rules of Major League Baseball. So maybe just an explanation, as opposed to having people like me trying to make YouTube videos where I'm pulling out my hair to explain it to others, and even then we don't quite get it. Why not a handbook to explain some of these systems like line chemistry? But from line chemistry, we can move on to the subject of coaches. Coaches are unfortunately very broken, especially when it comes to hiring them. Let's get into this. So the coaches themselves, if a coach is listed as NHL associate coach, he should be interested in being an NHL associate coach. Very, very often you'll go to hire, let's say, an NHL associate coach. You'll go and click right here. You'll say, yep, I'm offering you NHL associate coach. You click on offer contract, and then they come back saying, you know what, I don't like the role that you're offering me. Or you're an NHL assistant coach. You go to see one of those. Hey, you want to be my assistant coach? No, I want to be an associate coach. Then you have a spot for NHL goalie coach, but there are no NHL goalie coaches. It doesn't make sense. So all the assistant coaches want to at least be an assistant coach. I say, hey, you want to be my goalie coach? No, I don't like that. I don't want to be a goalie coach. But there are no goalie coaches. So it doesn't make sense in my mind. It makes sense if a coach rejects my contract offer because he doesn't like the market, the roster, the staff chemistry, fine, whatever. But if he's rejecting solely because of the role, then why is that his listed role? So that just really boggles my mind. Even if I'm looking at E-rated coaches, yes, their teaching specialty is goalies, but they think that their quality is AHL assistant coach. So if I say, hey, you want to be an AHL goalie coach? They're going to either say no, or I need to overpay them, and they'll say, okay, reluctantly, I've thought about it. So that's why I play with owner mode off. With owner mode off, there's no staff budget. Unfortunately, I need to offer every staff member way over what they're asking so I can get them in that role. I think we also need a better understanding, this goes back to the handbook, of how coaches affect our players. Yes, my coach has, let's say, A- teaching, A- coach influence, someday maybe even A+ once he grows over time. That's great. But now when I go over to the player growth screen, I can't see how the coach has impacted my player. I only see natural growth, statistical growth, morale growth. How has my coach affected my player? Just kind of hoping that it's happening in the background isn't very immersive in my opinion. And that's with my coaching staff as the human. The AI coaches only seem to build lineups based on line chemistry. From this, we get all kinds of wonky lineups around the NHL where depth players are playing on like the top line, especially if they have some sort of X factor, while top players, especially those with no X factors, get buried in the bottom 6. So if you have to, please just go back to basing lineups on overall, not on X factors and line chemistry. Because players with X factors will always have the most chemistry, making them the first liners on any given team. There are a ton of examples of that already just looking in this franchise mode here. Logan Cooley, he has X factors, doesn't matter, he's a 77 overall depth forward, first line center. Nick Schmaltz, meanwhile, gets bumped to the second line even though he's an 86. Even here in Tampa Bay, I'm going to get into it later how I'd like to be able to edit player positions again, but Steven Stamkos, who plays a lot of wing, why can't I make him a left wing or a right wing, whatever, so that Tampa will put him on their top line, and then Anthony Cirelli can be the actual second line center, as opposed to Cirelli playing on the wing, which makes no sense. He's definitely a centerman, and Stamkos is being relegated to the second line when he could be first line with Point and Kucherov. So I think you get what I'm saying there. It would just be nice if the AI coaches would base their lineups more on overall. Now my last point here on coaching, and it's the biggest one, the coaching positions themselves. This is an incredibly frustrating game of musical chairs when you're trying to deal with your coaching staff. In the NHL, in your NHL staff that is, you can have a coach fill in as an interim head coach. Let's say I fire my NHL goalie coach. Let's get him out of here. And I'm going to demote everybody by 1. Let's say my assistant coach becomes my goalie coach, my associate becomes my assistant, and my head coach, I want him to be my new NHL associate coach. But you always need someone holding that spot, so it won't let me exit. I need to have an NHL head coach. So, no problem. I will promote this guy to interim NHL head coach. If I go out and I sign a new head coach, he will become the head coach, and this guy Hutchinson will then get demoted to associate coach. No problem. If I try to do that same thing in the AHL, here I go. I'm going to try to do that same thing. I'm going to fire the goalie coach, demote the associate to assistant, and then demote the NHL to the AHL head coach to the AHL associate coach. All right. So again, it won't let me leave. I need to fill in my AHL head coach spot. No problem. But the AHL interim head coach spot does not exist. Therefore, I need to keep an AHL head coach at all times, and if I want a new AHL head coach, I will either have to way overpay him to be my associate coach and then play some musical chairs and move people around, or I'd have to hire him as my NHL associate coach, let's say, then demote my AHL head coach, then demote my NHL associate coach, who's really my AHL head coach. It is incredible. It doesn't make sense. So to be able to do all that, you need to fire at least one coach to have that maneuverability. So basically, I lose staff and mess up my overall morale. I think the morale went lower in both the NHL and the AHL for staff chemistry there on the right, all because of how broken the system is. And once a coach is fired or left unsigned and goes back to staff free agency, if I were to re-sign them, all of their tendencies switch. Let's say I had to fire this guy Shannon, Reed Shannon. I really like him, but I have to fire him just to accommodate this game of musical chairs. He has things I like, 55% team fit, he's a conservative offensive pressure guy, 3-on-3 defense passive, blah, blah, blah. All of these strategies, all of these preferences, if I fire him and then rehire him the same day, completely different. All of his preferences will be totally changed. So I lose staff members, I lose staff chemistry, and I lose just who the people are themselves as they get their memories wiped, Men in Black memory wipe, all because of this mess of a system. So just being able to have an interim AHL head coach would alleviate all of that. Okay, catch your breath here. Moving on from line chemistry and coaches and all that, we now move to editing players. In NHL 22 and NHL 23, you cannot change player types or player positions, assumedly due to them not wanting you to cheese your line chemistry. But we're allowed to add X factors which do the same thing. So again, let's say I'm going back to Tampa Bay. I want to be able to help out what's happening in Tampa. I want Stamkos to play only wing, let's say. I'll take off his center eligibility so that the game will have him as a winger. If I go to details here, you'll see that it is blanked out. I cannot change it. I can change his jersey number on a different team, but I cannot change, I can even change his fighting preference, but I cannot change anything about his player type or his position. However, I could go to his abilities and take away all of his X factors or add more X factors if he didn't have any. I can go ahead, take it away. Nope, you don't get it anymore. So I really don't get that. If this is all happening because it was too easy to cheese line chemistry before, either make line chemistry more complex or just allow us to play how we want in this offline mode that doesn't affect anyone but myself. It's not like it's the world championship of line chemistry. Why is EA gatekeeping my fun? And just in general, next point, I should be able to change anything at any time. Again, just like franchise mode on MLB The Show, I can change drafted player names, attributes, player types, potentials, take a page out of the show, and allow me to do these things in my franchise mode save file as opposed to having to do it before I start up my save file, and once I do it, it's all locked in and I can never touch anything else. Having said all that about the ability to edit players, now I want to talk more about the players themselves. The first thing I want to talk about is progressive traits, and by traits I'm talking about the things that you see when you draft them. Loyalty guy, bad attitude, things like that, that if you're playing with morale on, it will really matter more. I usually don't play with morale on, but if you do, a player being a leader or not, or a presence or whatever else you want to call them. What's really the difference between leader and presence? Again, I couldn't really tell you, but when you draft the player, it'll say what that player's traits are. I would prefer to see those change over time. Loyal, if he's been on the same team for multiple years. Bad locker room presence if he's been buried in the lineup and he should be higher up for an extended period. That could affect contract negotiations, wanting to stay closer to home, you can add that in as well. Desiring a certain market size, I think that would make sense if it changed over time as opposed to being stuck with whatever they have at the age of 40 with whatever they got when they were drafted at the age of 17. Being stuck with what they have also goes into my thoughts about the X factors. I'd like to see X factors being added and removed over time. So, you got Slavkovsky, who's 18 here. He has 3 X factors: big rig, tape to tape, crease crasher. No matter what he does in his career, if he's a bust or if he breaks all of Gretzky's records, he will never have more or less X factors than he has right now. Meanwhile, you got Caulfield, let's say, whether he scores 60 goals a season or scores 3 goals a season, he will always have the Schneip ability until the day he retires, even if he goes down to 1-star shooting. So it might be a bit hard to define what makes a good one-timer shooter, 1T, what makes a great crease crasher, what makes that type of player. Okay, I understand. There's 40 X factors, some are more philosophical, but the ones about skating, about shooting, about passing in general, maybe like 10 out of 40, I would like to see those getting added and removed over the course of a career. If the player has 5-star shooting, give him the X factor for shooting. If he's going down and he's 32, 33, and now he has 3.5-star shooting, then take it away. 95 shot blocking, give him the shot blocking X factor. Down to 82, take it away. It should go according to the starting overalls in September of every season. Because if not, the league becomes imbalanced in my opinion. All these generated prospects come in with tons of X factors. Then you get real life players who don't have any. Most notably, I remember in AHL 22, I think it was Zegras and even Jack Hughes who had no X factors at all. I'm saying this is 2 games ago, but just to use it as an example. So then by the time you get into year 3, 4, 5, Jack Hughes, Trevor Zegras still have no X factors. Now, of course, they have a lot, but just to say, I'm sure there's other examples I could find if I went scrounging around the league. But if there are good players who become 90 plus overall at the age of like 23, and they still have none and never will. There has to be a way to tweak that. Keeping on the idea of attributes, I would love to see player training as well on one of these screens. It could be something active like in FIFA where you're actually doing drills, or it could be something more passive like in MLB The Show where you just set it and forget it. But either way, I should be able to choose what a player works on in addition to that player's growth as the season goes on. It's nice to see +1 across the board over a good season, but if I want my centerman who has 65 faceoffs to improve at faceoffs, or my 6'4" power forward with 3-star physical to be more physical or stronger, or my defensive defenseman who's incredible but only has 2-star skating to get better at skating. I would like to be able to have that player work on that. Now, of course, I would say put a cap on that training. I shouldn't be able to get that guy from 2 stars to 5 stars over the course of one season, but why not allow for some growth if I, as the person in charge of my team and my players' development, choose to focus heavily upon that? So those are my thoughts on training, keeping on the players themselves. When you look at a player's card, you get some details on that player and their contract situation. You click on the player, you see their overall, you see their role, you see their attributes, you see some of their morale, and you can sometimes, and then if you go all the way down, you get their contract info. Why not have those player cards also track the awards that they've won, or possibly even their place in franchise history? Like, this guy is currently 7th in all-time franchise assists, stuff like that, as opposed to just only having the record book, where if I go and look at my franchise's records, I only see who's number 1 all-time. And on a team like Montreal, where that's never going to change because they have such a deep history, I would like to see, okay, this player is number 1 all-time, but he's number 3 all-time. That would be cool to have. So either a screen like this in the record book that looks like the NHL table here. How come in this table here you can show me the top 5 of every stat, but then when I look at the franchise, I can only see who's number 1. So either in the record book or on the player's card, I would like to know more about this. And in addition to being able to track that player's records, whether it be in the NHL or just in one franchise, I would love to be able to know more about awards. What year did that player win an award? What year was that player a runner-up perhaps for an award? I'm not saying like the real league voting where you see who finished in 30th place, but again, a page out of MLB The Show's book, you can see who was the runner-up, who was the second runner-up, not just who was the winner. My next point on players is a huge one that many people have been saying for years and years and years. Give generated faces to generated prospects. When you have a player who does not have a picture in the game, like on the Canadiens right here, you got Sean Farrell. He's a real-life player without a picture. That is fine. Do not show me some generated face that looks nothing like him. I don't mind him staying as a gray silhouette. But for prospects who do not exist, like if we go and look at the draft class here, come on, there you go, these sticky menus. That's something else I would love to talk about, but I think it's more a PS4 thing, but still ridiculous. Everyone else, let's see, Connor Bedard, he's real, and then Mitchkov, Reinbacher, fine, they're created. But this guy, let's say Prince, Dakota Prince, no face. Rohan Shattenkirk, generated silhouette. All guys like that who have no faces. Even if it's like a bank of like 5 faces that everyone has the same look of one of those 5 players, even that would be better than the gray silhouette that players just still inexplicably have, while generated coaches don't. It doesn't make sense. If I go through and scroll through these hundreds of generated coaches, they all have a face. I don't get it. Walker Sutton's got a face. Sylvain Lapointe's got a face. Laurent Desjardins got a face. Len Van Riemsdyk got a face. Miles Von Fersen's got a face. Guillermo Steckel's got a face. You know, and there's a lot of variety in those faces. It can't be that the prospects still have nothing. But then in Be a Pro, if you put your Be a Pro in the lineup, oh, well, he's got a generated face when you go and look at edit lines and stuff like that. So it doesn't track, it doesn't make sense, and this is one of those, this could be a really quick fix in my opinion that I'm not sure why we don't have yet. And it really takes me out of the immersion I find when I'm in year 15, year 20, and the entire team is just gray silhouettes. Give me those crazy, if I go into the simulation and I see a random 19-year-old with a gray afro and handlebar mustache, I want to be able to know that without having to go into the simulation. But keeping on the theme of generated/drafted players, the ones who get added over time to your franchise mode, another suggestion that I've heard a lot would be to include the option of having female players. If franchise mode has female coaches and scouts, and the NHL game itself has lots of female players, I would say that women's hockey is at an all-time high. Why not add the possibility of having female players in franchise mode as well? And last year, I remember having Eve Gascon in NHL 22, who was a real-life woman who was playing in a junior league. So, you know, it could be a setting that each user can control. You can turn it on or off, and then even low, medium, high. But that way, those who want it can have it, and those who don't won't. Again, this is not one of the major things I would say is missing in franchise mode, but it's another instance of allowing us to decide what we want in our own offline save files. Last thing to say about the players is player development. I don't have much to say on this one aside from the fact that in previous games, some players, especially defensemen, will not grow in overall no matter what you seem to do in terms of ice time, teammates, salary, production, etc. Because of this, especially amongst defensemen, by the time you get 10 to 15 years into a simulation, due to a lack of defensive talent, their contract demands in relation to the rising salary cap will be exponentially higher than those of forwards and just disproportionate to that rising cap. If, let's say, a great player is asking for 10% of the cap, and that means 8.5 million today, when the salary is 100 million, well then that's 10 million. But it doesn't track that you have a depth forward who today makes like 900K, a million. By 2035, that player's asking for 1.5 million. But then the depth defenseman who's making 900K or a million today is asking for upwards of 4 million plus as like a 78 overall. When you get into 2035 onward or so. And that's not even getting into what the stars of the league want. That's 17 plus million. But those are my thoughts on player development. Always been a bit wonky, a bit confusing. It's always been a point of question, and I think just the lack of development from defensemen especially really hinders the league, as the AIGM doesn't know what to do when all these defensemen are asking for 5 million, and the teams just look horrible on paper. Starting goaltenders who aren't starting goaltenders, top pair defensemen who wouldn't even be like a 7th D in today's NHL. But I'll go ahead and stop there with my thoughts about the players themselves. I move on to the next category now. It's still kind of, well, yeah, it has to do with the players, but I want to talk a bit more about injuries. In franchise mode, I would love to see the ability to LTIR a player, to put them on long-term injured reserve. It would do everything that it does in the real world, right? It would allow you to have more flexibility for your salary cap if you had a long-term injury, especially to a top player. I don't think it should be that hard of a thing. If a player's injuries exceeds a certain amount of time, you can have the ability to LTIR them and then take them off at a later date. Also talking about injuries when simulating. If you're simulating and you get a pop-up that an injury has occurred, you are forced to either press best lines, which undoes everything that you've done, which you don't want to do, or you gotta pause, you gotta go into your lineup, you gotta make a few changes, and then when you're making those changes, it'll even say like replace in all lines. You click and it's like, yeah, it replaced them in some of the lines, but not the special team lines. Can you go check that out? So you're going through click, replace, especially if it's a top player. Replace them on the first line. Power play 1, penalty kill 1, 4-man power play 1, 3-on-3 overtime 1, extra attacker, shootout. You do all that, and then 2 days later, they're fully healthy. So why not allow me to have some sort of preset of my lines so that when that player is fully healthy and back to what he was, I can just press revert to preset 1, revert to preset 2, and I can keep different presets. Just like in FIFA where you have tons of preset formations and different lineups. Why can't we have those here in NHL? That would not only help just to say, you know, my team is doing well, or I want to shake up the lines, but really when an injury occurs. And finally, it's not an injury thing, but still kind of injury related in terms of simulation. If a player gets a game misconduct, which does happen in terms of over the course of a simulation, consider adding 1 to 5 game suspensions perhaps. I would only want this if it were easier to make line changes and there was a slider for how often suspensions happen. But in theory, I wouldn't think that suspensions should be a crazy thing to have in there. If they get a major penalty, if they get a game misconduct, force them to miss that next game. So now I move on to my next section, which is a big one, and it's all about transactions. Within transactions, we have the first kind of subsection, which is trading. I went ahead and simulated up to the trade deadline to kind of show you some of those things I'll get into in just a minute. But the number one thing that I got to say about trading, something that I hear a ton from franchise mode players, the ability to trade conditional draft picks. In franchise mode, you can trade any pick between round 1 and 7 for this season and the 4 seasons after that. So 5 years of 7 rounds of draft picks. That's good. I like that. And when I say I want to be able to trade conditional picks, I'm not saying crazy conditions that depend on the performance of another player and did they play in a certain percentage of the games in that postseason run, blah, blah, blah. None of that. I'm saying simple stuff like a top 10 protected pick that becomes a first the year after if that team does end up having a pick that's top 10, a second that can become a first if that team wins the Stanley Cup, stuff like that. And I think a little would go a long way. And honestly, of all my non-glitch related suggestions in this whole video, I feel like this might be the most reasonable one. Now from there, I want to highlight some of my suggestions on how the trade deadline minigame could be better. In previous games, it used to be that one, if you made a trade, it would reset all of your lines back to head coach best lines. And number two, whenever you're in the middle of making a trade and another team offers you a trade, it would kick you out of that trade screen. When I tried to recreate both of those glitches or those situations in the trade deadline minigame just now, they ended up not happening. So you know what? It could be that over the last few months in one of the patches it got fixed and I never realized it because I never went into the trade deadline minigame because I didn't want to risk my lines getting reset. Or it could be that I just didn't trade the right player and just no trades were coming my way. To be fair, the only players on my trade block here were like Montembeault and Paul Byron. So you let me know down in the comments, is the trade deadline minigame still glitched? If it isn't, well then it works just fine. If it is, those are my two things that I would want to fix about it. From trading, I have some more thoughts, and the next thing is a really big one as well, and it is present in other franchise modes, and that is the ability to force trades. What I mean by that is no matter what I offer to another team, if they're declining it and I want it to go through, I can force it through. Now, I am not someone who would use this very often, as it would probably fall in the cheese category for me in my style of franchise mode, but there are times in which you are offering a perfectly fine deal, perhaps one that is way more than fair, and the AI GM just refuses. Now, there could be reasons for why that GM refuses, but for example, say an AI team wants to trade like the 10th overall pick and you have the 20th overall pick. If you want to trade up from 20 to 10, you will have to add at least a couple of third round picks to make it happen, and that's with them wanting to trade the 10th overall pick. But if the roles were reversed and I have the 10th and I want to trade down to 20th, I think I'd be lucky to get a 4th round pick for trading down 10 spots. If I ask for even 1/3, they'd laugh at me and say no. Is this like discrimination for being human? I don't get this. On top of that, the trades that the AI would be happy to do also get rejected as soon as I ask for 1% retention of an expiring league minimum contract. So, come on, they are so against retaining salary. There's not a lot of logic to any of those trades. Come on now. It all comes back to the idea of I should be able to do whatever I want as the master of my fictional and offline universe. Forcing trades is not something that I would often, if ever, really use, but I would like to have the ability to do it, especially if I could kind of do real life trades and roster updates mid-franchise mode. If I want to say, hey, I want to get Erik Karlsson, I'm the Penguins, I want to get him from the Sharks, but they would never do it in this franchise mode for a Granlund and a first, whatever else the package was, well, I can force it through here and continue on in my life without having to reset my entire franchise mode. But I continue to digress. From trades, still under transactions, I'm going to move over to contract negotiations. In general, an overhaul would be needed for contract negotiations, especially in free agency. The formula is essentially just to overpay a player and hope you get them. No bonuses, no discussions, no addition of no movement clauses, nothing. So that's a big thing right there. Being able to negotiate no movement clauses, no trade clauses. Again, it doesn't have to be complicated. Oh, if a 15-team no trade list, submit me a list and the computer has to generate a list. No, just a full no movement clause, a no movement clause for the first few years of a contract. Baby steps. I think that would be a huge addition. And it would be able to add value and add interest to a contract offer. Furthermore, when you're offering contracts, again, speaking in free agency, being able to see which teams are interested is nice, but you don't really have any idea of what kind of number they're offering. So again, you send an unretractable overpay offer and you hope for the best. MLB The Show, again, another system that is a million times better, where you can see what offers are being sent out and how much interest that player has. If that's too transparent, then at least just a bit of a better idea. They offered a long-term deal upwards of this much money, as opposed to, oh, I offer him way more than he wanted, but there's another team that offered him even more, and I could have paid it, but I didn't know. Especially if a player wants to come to my team, he wouldn't just say, too bad, that other team offered me $50,000 more. There would be maybe a comeback and say, hey, I'm willing to sign with you, but you have to match this offer. I would love to see that, maybe inside of a July 1st mini game. I think that would be really great for free agency. Many improvements could be made in free agency as a whole, though, but the contracts that some players are asking for as well in general are just way too crazy. Like, you'll have random former NHLers who are 70 overall at 39 years old wanting $1.5 million, while there are 80 overalls who are willing to take league minimum. Overall, make negotiations feel like negotiations. Not this is what they're asking for, and if no one's interested, I can offer them 85% of what they're asking for. Oh, someone is interested? I gotta offer them 2 million more, or else there's no way that they'll sign with me. It can't be that it's always about the money. There must be other things in consideration. I'm a contending team. I'm offering them less, yes, but I'm a contending team with an A+ coach, with all this stuff. That should be taken into consideration, even if I have morale turned off. And this is one place where I'm not necessarily loving MLB's system, because at times, especially if it's re-signing a player, it'll tell you right away, bang, yes, I like it, I sign, or bang, I don't like it, I'm not signing it. But it would be nice if I send a player a contract that's way off and they're not going to sign it, tell me right now that you don't like it, as opposed to me waiting like 5, 6, 7 days and then, hey, I don't like it, but you could send me another one. You couldn't have told me that a week ago? So that's what I gotta say about free agency. Now what about RFA arbitration? When you have players who are expiring, they're either expiring as UFAs, so you gotta sign them before July 1st, or RFAs, who you can qualify and then you own their rights and you can continue to negotiate with them into the summer. But if a deal never gets struck, the player basically sits as an RFA for the entire season. Especially when you see big name prospects more often than not sitting out for an entire season because a deal never got hammered out. There's no arbitration like MLB The Show, whereas, hey, you have your number, I submit my number, and an independent third party will figure out a deal for us. But that goes into my final point, and this is, again, for this section, another big one. AI general managers need to be better. I'm not asking for them to be the chat GPT overlords of the world. I'm just saying basic stuff. For example, you have an RFA star who can't be signed because he wants, whatever, 9 million and you only have 8.65 and you gotta free up another 350K. Meanwhile, you have some depth player sitting in the press box making 3 million. The AI is smart enough to say, hey, we need to trade this player, and he goes on the trade block. But the AI itself needs to explore trade options with other teams, or even consider buying that player out, not just put him on the block and hope that I, the human, come along and save him. The AI does well to identify problems, too many goalies, not enough salary cap, but it does nothing to solve those problems. This relates back to my points on trading, as the AI GM may say, hey, we need a goalie. But instead of trading for one, or signing a 79 overall in free agency for league minimum, which they definitely have the salary cap space for, they'll play a 71 and a 68 overall for the entire season instead. So there are more of my thoughts on contract negotiations and the AI having to be a bit better. And my next thought, still under the umbrella of transaction, is the off-season. In the off-season, or anytime really, I should be allowed to go over the salary cap. Allow me to do what I have to do, but obviously don't let me play a game until things have been fixed and I'm salary cap compliant. Not being able to call up or send down a player for salary cap reasons, or because in roster moves, if I go and try to send, let's say, 4 players down and call 4 players up to try and play with the things, oh no, you're only allowed to send down 3 at a time. You can only put 3, can't put 4. Why can't I go over the salary cap just for like 5 seconds to do a little paper move, and then I'll be cap compliant in a minute before I even play my next game? So once again, I'm playing musical chairs. Furthermore, in the off-season, I'd love to be able to see my lines. Another thing you can't see in the off-season. This little screen right here where you can see edit lines, view lines, roster moves. This doesn't exist in the off-season. This disappears. Just like how trading disappeared on this one because we're past the trade deadline, this edit and view line option disappears during the off-season. So then I have to go to contracts and start counting. Okay, I have 3 centermen, 4 left wingers. Super long process for no reason. I just want to see where players are slotted, and at the very least, provide me some sort of depth chart. Again, MLB The Show! Look at this depth chart! And it even shows you your depth for future years, and how that player signed on for 4 more years, so in 4 years, he'll be slated to be your top line left wing, and he'll be a 90 overall by then if things go well. Again. And speaking of more off-season stuff, from season to season, the AI may change a player's AAV, the money that they make on their contract. For example, if a team is under the salary cap, it will make the contracts on that team worth more so that they can hit the cap floor. And if they're over the salary cap, the money that those players are making will be reduced so that they're not over the salary cap. In my opinion, if a team is under the salary cap floor, it should automatically be assigned a free agent player who is on a deal that gets them to that cap floor. Instead, a player who is signed to, for example, a 6-year contract at $9 million is now signed at $10.5 million. And that doesn't change in year 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It gets changed 1 year and it stays like that for the entire duration of that contract. It brings the team to the cap floor, but then handcuffs them for future seasons. For example, I do my own changes to this. I have a whole article on it on Puckpedia. I have a video of it as well, how to make your roster salary cap compliant. For example, I'll go ahead and I'll take Phil Kessel and I'll put him on league minimum, and I'll take a few other players on Vegas and put them on league minimum just for 1 year so they're not over the salary cap. But then, let's say I didn't do that one time on Pittsburgh. I recently did the Erik Karlsson move, and I didn't make Pittsburgh salary cap compliant. The $11.5 million of Erik Karlsson is now only $9.325, as the Penguins could not afford $11.5 million without me doing some salary cap jiu-jitsu. So now the Penguins get to have Karlsson 4 years at 9.3, or 5 years technically, since this mode started in 22-23, instead of at $11.5 million. So that now gives the Penguins an unfair advantage. So it's not fair for the teams who get cap hits alleviated, nor for the teams who get cap hits intensified. There's pretty much the heart of what I have to say about franchise mode, transactions, trades, just better AI management. But moving on to the next section now, as your franchise mode goes on, players will retire. So here we're going to talk about player retirement and the record book. When a player retires, it would be great to be able to have an option where you can turn them into a coach or a scout. Maybe it's only the better players, or maybe there's like a randomized selection of please choose from these players, I don't know what, or maybe even the game does it itself. But it can't be that every season there are dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of players who retire, and there's maybe 1 or 2 that become a coach and 1 or 2 who become a scout. I would like to see more options than just that, because that's always fun as well when you're in year 15, 20, and you have Crosby and Ovechkin as your coaches or scouts and stuff like that. Another cool option when a player retires would be able to retire their number. It's just a preliminary idea, but I think that jersey retirement in general, with an accompanying ceremony even that you could place on a calendar the following year, would be great. You have bobblehead nights and all these things. Why not a jersey retirement night? If you don't want to put the graphic of the guy standing on the ice, just a banner going up with a jersey number and a name. As simple as that. And speaking of ceremonies, you know, how about raising a Stanley Cup banner, a conference banner, a divisional championship banner? That would also be nice, and again, something that was in previous games. This next section is called Settings I Don't Use But Would If They Were Fixed. Personally, I don't turn owner mode or morale on when playing franchise mode, so I don't have much to say on little tweaks. But my thoughts on these two come down to their major flaws, which have kept me away for years. So number 1, in owner mode. In owner mode, you have the owner tab here, owner goals, your facilities, marketing budget, all that stuff. I like the budget. I like having promotion nights. I like that kind of thing. What I really don't like is that the upgrading of different things, such as your facilities, does not matter at all. Having to upgrade the bathrooms is of no interest to me. If I go over to where the bathrooms, oh, they're at 16 and 100, you got to keep them maintained. You know, if it gets down to 0, what really matters? My owner's unhappy, I'm gonna get fired, I win 7 straight Stanley Cups, but the bathrooms aren't good, you're gonna fire me? Like, what does all of this really mean? You want me to do all kinds of budgets and maintenance, but you give me such a small budget. I'm trying to hire a good staff and put a good team on the ice, but I gotta keep track of concessions, the team store, bathrooms. I don't, like, what is it all for, really? My fans are still coming to games. My players are still happy. It's just the imaginary owner. There's no really consequence, I find. How about if I let everything fall apart and things are going bad, the owner comes to me and he forces a relocation. You can choose where you go, but what if you get forced to have to relocate your team because you've let things fall apart for so long? If you can turn on or off forcing the owner to let you relocate, why can't you turn on or off the owner telling you, hey, we're relocating, you got to figure this out, because you didn't do any of your owner goals for the last 10 years? That would make me think, hey, I should probably do this, as opposed to, why am I going to waste my time upgrading bathrooms when the fans are still coming anyways and the budget is still there anyways? Why am I going to waste money on that? So that's owner mode. I don't find there's any huge problems with it. I just don't really get the point of it. Morale is where I have problems with it. Having players get upset over losing, let's say, like, the season starts and they're named captain for some unknown reason, and I say, hey, you're not the captain. This guy's been the captain for the last 10 years. I take away his captaincy. Oh, I am disgusted. How dare you take the captaincy away from me? So now he has low morale, low overall, and he's starting the season at an 81 instead of an 86. I don't get that. So their morale goes down because they're upset over losing captaincies they never had, staying out of the lineup and demanding a trade when I hold them out of the lineup due to having an injury. He had a concussion for 3 months. It's a playable injury, but you'll be fully healthy if you sit out for 1 more game. Oh, why haven't you been playing me? I can't believe my ice time. Let's have a conversation, and you better promise me no more ice time or else I'm not going to be happy about it. Ooh, hold your horses, buddy. Especially when every conversation is just a copy-paste. Either they're happy, or they're mad, or they're demanding something. It gets very, very stale after the first season. Another reason why I don't play Be a Pro. So stuff like that, I find it just pure nightmare fuel. And it has kept me from turning morale on for many, many years. So without going into too much more detail than that, I just think it needs an overhaul that keeps such volatile changes from happening. In theory, the system itself is okay. Who are the leaders? Who are the presences? Morale and being happy will allow you to be playing better, but players get way too upset, way too fast, demanding way too much when they have no right to do so. And it's as if they're like spoiled, petulant children. I really don't get these conversations, and they bog down simulations so much. I've been burned so much by it that I just have like a deep hatred for turning morale on. Although in a perfect world, I'd love to have it, where it impacts the player's growth, and if they're playing well, they'll get better. If they're not playing well, they'll get worse. But being upset because I held them out because of an injury, or because they're getting 30 seconds less of ice time than they think they should, but they're having a great season nonetheless, it's very frustrating. Last thing I don't use is the expansion mode, so playing with a 33rd NHL team. This is not a broken thing, but I do have a suggestion for it, and I think it would be being able to control the year in which an expansion team enters the league. Right now, you can only create a team and then have it enter the league for an expansion draft in year number 1, but why not have a 33rd team kind of sitting there and you program them to be entering the league in year number 3, year number 5, something like that. Again, just a suggestion. And you know what? I lied, because there is one last thing I gotta mention, and that is probably the biggest glitch in all of franchise mode. I almost forgot it because it's not quite in the mode, it's surrounding the mode. It's your save files. I'm not gonna experiment with this, I can't really show you, but if you've played franchise mode, you know this pain. So for example, I currently have my Pittsburgh Penguins franchise mode going for our franchise mode series here on the channel. I have my 1 data save file. I made one in January, then I made a new episode, I saved again, I have it in April, and then there's also the autosave backup. For some reason, there are 2 backups, and then for my wish list video that I'm making right now, my 1 save file also has its own backup because I have autosave turned on. So because I have autosave turned on, it's going to make these backups fine, that's okay. But the thing is, let's say I left the Penguins franchise mode for a little bit, I didn't touch it for a few weeks, even a few months, and I'm playing the wish list franchise, I make another franchise on top of that. Eventually, these save files will disappear. They will be saved over. Is it like the 1990s where I have VHSs that I'm going to save on top of? I literally have like a terabyte of storage on this PlayStation. Could it not at least tell me like, hey, by the way, as you exit, this backup is about to save up over a previous backup. Do you want to do something about that? But no, it's happened in the past where I have had series that just completely disappear because let's say I'm doing a career simulation and that's simmed over my franchise mode. When you think, oh, well, just turn off the autosave. Yeah, you could do that, but then if your game freezes when you're a few years deep, then you're up the creek, try to reload a save from like 6 years ago. So it's either you risk the autosave and it could save over something, or you don't autosave and you're really playing with fire. What I do is essentially every time I open my franchise mode, I'll go and delete a couple save files. So for example, let's say I delete the wish lists and I'm going to play my Penguins franchise. I will go ahead and delete January and delete 1 of the Aprils and just keep 2 of the Aprils, as opposed to 3 Aprils and a January. Way too many save files, and it's just, again, playing with fire. And I believe that just about does it, ladies and gentlemen. A comprehensive list of what we'd love to see in NHL in the coming games, and as well kind of a summary of the things that are currently not going right with franchise mode. So I make this not out of anger, not out of hate, not out of disgust, but rather out of, with this new team behind NHL moving into NHL 24 and onward, I hope that this will be listened to, and I hope that just some, and eventually all, but not all in one game, eventually all of these things could be added, as many of them are already, many of these things already exist. NBA 2K, MLB The Show, FIFA, Madden, as I mentioned and showed some examples from. In some cases, some of the things I've suggested that are in other games have been in that game for years, even a decade plus. Some of those even other EA games. I understand some are from MLB, San Diego Studios, but I don't know, there's no excuse in my mind for not having the majority of these things that have existed for so long. Some of these things were even in past games, but were removed for some unknown reason, like the All-Star Game and other things that I mentioned throughout the video. At least tell us why they're being removed if you do remove them. That's what I'm hoping this new leadership team will be able to do. The lack of communication in previous years has been a huge thing that has had to be fixed in that regard. So now to see at least EA saying the right things, I like that very much. Now, you got to put your money where your mouth is for sure. You got to show me. You can't just tell me, you got to show me. But as of now, as of the first couple of weeks of us talking about NHL 24, I am impressed. I like how the game looks. I just hope that the offline modes will get the attention that they deserve. Not just, hey guys, we're doing Connected Franchise now, boom. Yes, we'd be so happy with that. But there are a lot of things I just mentioned. I barely said anything about Connected Franchise in this video. So many other things that we'd like to see not only added, but just fixed in general. So that's my soapbox for this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that you enjoyed it. Leave a thought down here in the comments or over on the Discord server, link in the description. What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? What did I maybe even miss? What is on your wish list? Let me know all of that. That'll continue to be into my NHL 25 wish list. Hopefully this video serves as something that EA can look at for suggestions or for inspiration for things to fix or just change entirely in future games. I hope that it does have some sort of impact. I put a lot of effort into this video, so I just hope that someone in the right place sees it and we can continue to enjoy the mode that we all love so much. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for taking the time to watch this one. If you liked it, please do leave a like itself, and of course do consider subscribing for all upcoming NHL 24 content, franchise modes, career simulations, and much more here on the channel. Take a second to check it out. We're getting close to 7,000 subscribers. It's been an incredible ride, and it is such a strong community here. We'd love to have you join it as an assistant general manager because it'll be that much better with you as a part of it. So I'll leave you there, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you once again for taking the time. Looking forward to NHL 24, less than a couple of months away, and I am very excited to see you again in the next one.